Welcome to the Consumer Goods Forum Global Summit Special Edition of the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada, an elite organization that brings together consumer goods retailers and manufacturers together from around the world. The Consumer Goods Forum Global Summit is a CEO-led group that aligns the world's retailers and consumer goods manufacturers together alongside other key stakeholders to secure customer trust and drive positive change, including greater efficiency. This year, the Global Summit was held in Vancouver in June, and since I was in the neighbourhood, Victoria, giving a keynote presentation on the state of global grocery e-commerce, I grabbed a Harbour Air float plane from Victoria for the fun and picturesque half-hour flight over to Vancouver Harbour. Highly recommend taking this trip if you have not had that opportunity, by the way. At the Global Summit, I had the opportunity to mix and mingle with about 900 of the biggest thinkers, brightest minds in retail, brand, and strategy games. So, of course, took the opportunity to do some chitting and chatting for the Voice of Retail on and around the conference floor, in the media room, and even on the EY Thought Leadership yacht parked behind the Vancouver Conference Centre. So first up, a conversation with Kristina Rogers, Global Consumer Industries Leader, Consumer Products, Retail, Agribusiness from EY. Based out of Chicago, but born and raised in Canada, Kristina is responsible for global business leadership across multiple consumer industries, and we talked about global ecosystems, risk, and the nature of innovation. Next, two global Canadian loyalty leaders who speak on an international stage, Carolyn Papadatos, Global Loyalty Consulting Leader for Loyalty One, and Brian Pearson, CEO of Loyalty One and a frequent and frequently quoted contributor to Forbes, thought leader in the loyalty space. In a wide-ranging interview, we talked about big L loyalty and little L loyalty, what has changed in the loyalty space in 25 years, the nature of modern retail loyalty and technology, and the richness of the tools. Lastly, an interview with two retail strategists as we talk about their thoughts on the latest in retail brand marketing, consumer strategy, and consumer insights. This interview was recorded on the EY yacht parked in Vancouver Harbour, so the background is pretty noisy with Harbour Air flights coming and going, but stay with us as the conversation is really worth it. But first, here's my conversation with Kristina Rogers from EY. Kristina, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Michael. Thank you. I'm in Vancouver. Got a beautiful view, so all good.
Yeah, it is a fantastic day here in Vancouver with the Global Summit, Consumer Goods Global Summit. It's a gathering of the who's who, and I just had the opportunity to take in your presentation. I want to talk about that in a bit. But first of all, let's start a little bit about you, your personal journey. You're Queen's Economics, Harvard MBA. You're a bit of a slacker, I guess. So you really, 20 countries that you've lived in. Tell me about yourself and how you got to where you are, and a bit about your role today.
Okay, absolutely. So I actually grew up in London, Ontario, and so yes, I went to Queen's and worked in Toronto for about 3 years, and then left Toronto to go to HBS, and thought I would go back, and I've never been back. So since 1995, of course I go back, but
sure.
I haven't been back. So my career has been primarily abroad, which always excited me to use my job as a passport to really be in different parts of the world. So I've lived extensively in South Africa, Dubai, Istanbul, London, worked across, as you mentioned, probably over 60 countries in terms of just been working with clients and EY and previous companies. So I feel extremely fortunate to have, landed where I have, having had that phenomenal international career. And so now I am in this role, which is the Global Consumer Leader at EY, which encompasses consumer products, retail, and agribusiness.
So tell me what that role means. That's a big title. That's a big role. What do you actually do within the EY organization and for their clients or your clients?
Yeah, well, like many companies, we're an organization in transformation. So, historically we had service lines, we were auditors, tax people, et cetera, and we went and sold those services to clients who needed them. And, as the world moves and as markets move and as, our clients need new things for the challenges they face, we need to evolve as well. So as a firm, we've been moving more to an industry-led model, which is really, ensuring that we as EY know the trends, know what's going on in these industries, to set our own strategy of how we're going to serve our clients better, and to be sure that we have the brightest talent in the right markets for where our clients are. And so I'm a part of that. It's thinking through what is the strategy for EY for those three sectors that roll up to consumer industry, and making sure that we are bringing the best and brightest ideas, people, to our clients around the world.
It's an interesting role because you both have the ability or the task to go into your clients and figure out their vast strategic challenges, but also bring that back and architect your own, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a great challenge. I've been in this role for almost 4 years. I started at EY 6 years ago. I joined as the emerging markets leader for consumer. So that was right in my wheelhouse.
Sure.
At the time when I was spending a lot of time in the Gulf and in Turkey, the Middle East, which we still consider as emerging markets, although GDP per capita in some of those places, I'm not sure, but so it's been a great run, and I'm really thrilled with the challenges that we have and the success we're having.
So I just sat through your first presentation here, and I was intrigued by this display or this articulation of this vast network and ecosystem that now large and mid-sized companies have, and it was almost a dystopian collection of thousands of companies in a value chain connected. And one of the things that struck me or stood out to me was we were talking about the risks, and one of the risks was cyber attacks, that there was one company, 50,000 cyber attacks, but it wasn't on the company itself. It was deep within their network. Talk a little bit about that and how you're helping companies think that through.
Yeah, and I think that was actually as this organization started to get their head around what they were facing. It was shocking for them too. So this is a global company, probably operating in well over 100 companies, and they have increasing as their business has become more and more complex. They have added partners and added people and different businesses and all sorts of things all around the world. And so what they've discovered as they've tried to get their arms around what they've been creating is that there are these attempted hacks going on, throughout the world, and not so much on them as a corporation, but in their system, their vast ecosystem of partnerships and ventures and everything else that they've been doing. And so I think it was quite shocking that the number was that high. And so when I say 50,000, that was no exaggeration.
Right.
There are people trying to get into this system, every day, all the time.
Sure, somewhere, somehow. Talk about why, and I guess what's the value proposition for creating a system that is so vast? Is it about agility? Is it about economics? So what is it that's driving companies to create such a vast ecosystem? Now they're realizing some of the downsides, perhaps, but what are the upsides? What's the advantage to that?
I mean, I do think it's both of those things you said. So, as we think about the nature of the market, right, and consumers. So most of the companies I work with, they have an end consumer at the end of the day. They're trying to sell more products or different products or keep them in their fold or what have you. And that used to be pretty linear. Right? It was fairly straightforward. You compete against your competitor and you were done, and you hoped you won. And I think now with consumers are so empowered with technology. I mean, we have so many choices. We are changing all the time. We are now demanding solutions, not just end products and so on. And that's requiring companies to move on a dime, to really be able to be, as you said, agile, and to quickly catch up to kind of changing consumer needs, both from where they were last year, but even from where they were 6 months ago. And so I think that has required companies that are large and in some cases cumbersome, and they're set up in a way that served yesterday. They're set up more for scale than agility, right? Absolutely. So it's tough. It's tough to then reorient. So one thing that has helped and worked is to create partnerships. Corporate venturing has had its pluses and minuses, but I see more and more companies getting into different sorts of venturing, investing, getting partnerships where they're missing certain capabilities. Usually, it's in the tech space. There's a war for talent. So how do we attract more talent into the fold? Can we get into relationships and partnerships there? And so I think just the need for speed, agility, transformation at an increasing pace is forcing companies, they can't do it themselves. So it's forcing them to look outside of the business.
And I see a couple of different models evolving. So you look at like the Krogers of the world who've spun off a big part of their technology into the Sunrise technologies, right? They said, well, let's leave the core technology group to just make sure the lights are on and the POS is working. But let's spin out some of this technology to be able to deal with the nimbleness and the different stakeholders and the different suppliers. And I think Walmart does the same with their Walmart Labs, right? So the other approach is to just develop this vast ecosystem of suppliers, right? I guess those are the two, broadly stated, those are the two paths. I guess that's what's so different, right? Companies used to want to own everything, want to do everything themselves, want to have complete control. But I guess it's the pace of change.
They're being forced out of that model, because I think there was this concern that if you didn't own anything, it wouldn't be done the way you wanted to, or maybe there was sort of a misalignment of your purpose and values if you worked with partners. But I think now there is the opportunity. So there's two different things going on. There's the strategic outsourcing of and partnering of things that I just don't know how to do myself, and the market's demanding I know how quickly. So let's partner. Let's figure this out. And then there's the outsourcing of things. There are companies who are better equipped to do that today. So you see a lot of outsourcing of back offices. You see a lot of, process automation as a service, outsourcing, basic functions and services in companies. And so all of it's creating different sorts of risks, different sorts of elements of trust issues. Choosing the right partner becomes fundamental to making sure that the business runs properly.
It's interesting because if you look back over the past recent number of years, you see companies who would buy digital companies because they really wanted to acquire the talent. They were somewhat interested in the technology, but the talent was foremost. I think the poster child for that is Walmart. When they acquired Jet, Mark Laurier is doing a fantastic job. That's the perfect model. Acquire the talent and bring it in, but that doesn't always work. We've seen other examples where, just acquiring a company and acquiring the talent, they don't necessarily want to work for the big global company. That's why they exist today. Let's get to I'll talk a little bit about the consumer, and then I want to talk about digital transformation and sustainable competitive advantage. So at the beginning of your presentation today, you talked about an AI-powered experience for a consumer. Is it technology that is fueling this pace of change that companies have to take and run with? Is this an artificial construct, this pace of change? Like, hasn't it always been fast? And what's accelerating it to create this global transformation?
I mean, I think it's just the willingness to adopt the technologies into our lives. And so maybe it's certain cohorts of consumers that are doing that at a faster pace. So whether it's, stereotypically younger people or
digital natives,
Gen Z, et cetera, Gen Z, let me say.
Yes, you're in Canada.
I'm Canadian and I'm in Canada, so we're talking about Gen Z.
Exactly.
But I think it's just this availability, first of all, right? There's new things all the time, new ways of making our lives better, new ways of optimizing my time, my choices, in my day. So I think there's a couple of things going on. It's just the pace of what's thrown at us. It's our ability to absorb it. It's our desire to absorb it. And so when I think about AI and AI companions, I don't think we've scratched the surface on how those are going to change our lives and change our decision making and change the way we optimize ourselves every day, depending on the parameters you set up with those AI companions. And so what we shared today in the session was really sharing a future view of somebody who's completely set up their companion to optimize every aspect of their life, such that they don't really make that many decisions. They're presented with a curated set of choices, but they don't have to make many decisions. And I think if we believe that that's the future, the challenge is, well, how are you part of that person's day then? If you're a branded good or a branded service,
right? How do you get into that ecosystem even to begin with?
Where do you get in? And so we've done some thinking around buying and shopping, just some in the near term, let alone that far out future, but. If AI is the intermediary between a company and a consumer and is curating or is making decisions, how do you cut into that? And so, I think the companies that are at risk are companies who have products and categories that fall into what I would say transactional buying, right? I, as a consumer, don't care that much, as I have more line of sight with blockchain and everything else in terms of what the product is, what it stands for, the brand value kind of diminishes because that used to tell me those things. And so I can just farm that buying to AI. I really don't care.
Just tell me what is the best, most nutritious product with a good...
set my parameters and let it go. And then there, I think, are other products and categories that fall into more of a shopping dimension where I care about those things. I care about, I enjoy them, I want to think about them, I value them, they share my purpose, and so I want to have the experience with those things. And so I think, at risk are the, if you fall into transactional buying at this point, I think you've got to be thinking about a different way.
So the brand manager's thinking, I want my laundry detergent to be an emotional choice to fulfill your life and your family's vision, may be at risk of falling into a transactional.
Correct, and I think there are a number of consumer companies and retailers need to think about it too because they stock these things, right? So where's the purchase pattern going to go for a lot of these categories? And so, and then how do you make your service or product more emotional? More, I want to experience it so that I want to be in control rather than let technology be in control.
So last question for you, though it's a big one. How do companies successfully take on digital transformation in such a vastly complex ecosystem? Right, so it's vast, and we see many companies taking on digital transformation. Where do they begin? How do they start, and how do they tackle what we would call digital transformation? Which probably the definition probably differs between you and I and 4 other people at the table. But think about that for a second. How does digital transformation happen? What's your advice to retailers and brands around that?
And I think let's pick up retailers. So when I think of digital transformation, let's park the functions inside the organization. So many people are adding robotic process automation. That's part that it can be called digital transformation at some level. But if you think about just my approach to the market, we've really got to be thinking, way in the future back. So I described a bit of this a few minutes ago, but, and take a risk. You've got to, kind of put a stake in the ground. How do I think people are going to be living their lives? How will I, add value to their lives in that way? I know, or at least I feel I know, and so I'm hoping our clients know, consumers are now in the driver's seat, right? They're smart consumers, and nothing is one-to-one anymore. So I don't just go shopping. I do all kinds of other things on my phone, or I don't just buy insurance. I get influenced by the way I had an experience, at the gas station, or whatever it is. I mean, there's a big web out. The
intersecting experience.
Right, and so that's fueling how I live. And I think, especially retailers need to think, well, all these channels I have, or these things that I do, what do I digitize? What do I leave as a human experience? And I think you need to think about a vision of the future and further out, and put a stake in the ground and believe in that future, and then start building towards it. And what are the tools and tech? And we know tools and technology and digital applications are going to be part of it. So how do I build to be successful with that consumer the way they're living out? So I think it's a lot of, while we say we've got data and we can make all these choices, I still think if you're really going to prepare yourself in a digital way for a future, you need to imagine what that future is and make some choices. And some people are going to get it wrong, and others are going to be more heroes.
Well, thanks so much for joining me on The Voice of Retail. It's been a great conversation. It's exciting times. It's complex times. I can't imagine a better time for you to do your work and for your clients to
absolutely.
engage. So,
good time for me.
Well, thanks, and welcome back to Canada. I hope you have safe travels wherever you're taken next in the world. And thanks again for joining me.
Thank you, Michael.
Brian, Caroline, welcome to The Voice of Retail. How are you both doing today?
Excellent. Very good.
We're sitting here in Vancouver at the Global Products Global Summit, Consumer Products Global Summit, with this beautiful vista behind us of Vancouver. But we're here to talk about some serious business. So first of all, let's talk about yourself. So Brian, why don't we start with you? Tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are today, and what your role is today, and what brought you here.
Maybe I'll start at the far end, which is I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Loyalty One, and been in and around the loyalty space for about 30 years. I actually started in consumer packaged goods, so I started as a product manager and working in that sector, and very quickly discovered that one of the things I had a love-hate with marketing, which I loved the strategy part, and hated the art part, if you want, just in the sense that I loved coming from a science background, things that were very quantifiable. Loyalty was a path which not only solved real issues for our partner companies, but was also one which brought consumer data into the mix. And for me, that's always been at the center of the purpose of marketing, which is what's the consumer really want. And so, long time in loyalty, but ultimately it's about, how do you represent and show up in a way that helps shape shopper behavior for our clients. Okay.
Caroline.
I also work for Loyalty One, and I lead our global consulting practice in loyalty. And loyalty, as you know, is a complicated thing. It's both a tactic and
it's $1 million
strategy.
Word, right?
Exactly. It's both far-reaching and highly tactical, and I'm sure we're going to talk more about that as we continue our conversation. But in terms of my background, I'm a long-time marketer, direct marketer, data-driven marketing, when there even was such a thing.
I think you and I actually crossed paths about 3 or 4 times back and forth. One time was at Rogers Media. I was at Rogers Shopping Channel. You were there as well. And
so long time
places, right?
sort of CMO, but always been much more drawn to the measurable side of marketing, if you will. Not so much of a mass marketer. And increasingly now in the loyalty space and working with retailers all around the world. We have clients in South America, in Europe, in China, in Singapore, and of course, obviously, our home base in North America, both Canada and the U.S.
Right.
Loyalty is my passion.
Well, let's talk. It's a good segue. Let's talk about loyalty. Back in my early days, loyalty was Club Z. It was like a coffee card. You bought something, you got a bunch of points. Its degree of sophistication since then has increased, geometrically. And I wanted to talk about that. You've both been in the loyalty space, whether you call that CRM and loyalty or coalition marketing. You've been in that space for a long time. What are the changes you've seen over the past 20 years that are the most impactful, that have taken it to be what it was to what it is today?
Yeah, I think the foundations, we delineate very strongly between what we call big L loyalty and little L loyalty. Big L loyalty is that aspirational, emotional connection that you want to create between a consumer and a brand. And little L is the various tactics and the means that you have to actually connect the customer to that broader purpose or vision. And it's a way often to direct the consumer to have the experiences which will lead to the big L loyalty. For me, and I'm sure Caroline would have her own opinion, is I think that the foundations of it haven't changed, but the mechanics and the abilities to deliver on what we imagined back 25 years ago has completely transformed. And you can just make the list of buzzwords that go down there, right? So you've got artificial intelligence, you have the cloud, you have mobile marketing, you have all these technologies which have the confluence of them have actually created a very rich environment for which to carry out the strategies and ideas that we foundationally had 25 years ago. So for me, nothing's changed and everything's changed, if you know what I mean. I
was listening this morning to, I think he was the head of the Google Cloud, and he was it was a good discussion because they were chatting about how, in essence, I'm simplifying, but in essence, the challenge of the technology has kind of gone away, leading to your point, right? That now you really, though, have the excuse also of the technology has gone away, and now you better be pretty precise about your business objectives. Is this what you're hearing, and how do you have that conversation with retailers, Carol?
Well, I'd say one thing that hasn't changed is it was about the customer, and it still is about the customer. It starts with the customer, but way back when, you would see in research random samples or average customers or representative customer profiles, and that's not the case anymore. What technology has enabled is it's a one-to-one. Building loyalty is an exercise of one-to-one, or certainly one-to-segment.
One-to-few at
one-to-few. And it's not even one mechanic, if you will, and Brian is exactly right. It's both tactics and it's aspiration, vision. But what we're seeing increasingly amongst retailers and in those conversations is if you know that you have multiple segments, those shoppers are motivated in different ways by different types of rewards, by different types of experiences. And what we are seeing is for most retailers, you need the the strategic capability to be able to layer those rewards and those offers one on top of the other. So it's not as simple as saying, I'm going to give my best customers a paid program, and I'm going to give every other customer, a free this or that. It's about saying, I'm going to have a strategy, a 52-week calendar on what offers and series of ways I'm going to engage customers using a mix of experiences, rewards, points, cashback, and the list goes on. And you really need to be very thoughtful about that strategy. And probably the biggest issue we have when we go into retail, or the biggest perhaps adjustment that we need to make in the conversation, is to say that there is this perception it's something you take off the shelf. You take a loyalty program off the shelf, you plug it in, the technology's there, and suddenly it works, and customers start flocking into your stores. It actually starts with some thoughtfulness around your strategy.
Right. I just thought I'd pile in with the thought that, it makes me feel really old, but back before the digitalization of everything we do in marketing, you were restricted by a cost environment on what you could do. Today, given you're delivering a digital message, there's nothing which really stops that one-to-few, as you said, or one-to-one consideration. And so the consumer, in turn, is also starting to look out and say these vanilla-type approaches, which is not recognizing who I am and my belief system as it relates to a brand. You start to also get the consumer saying, I expect more. I expect more. And so the best practices, I'd say in loyalty, used to be that if you were in the food retail business, you were basically comparing your program against what all the other food retailers were doing.
Sure.
And today, I think the consumer looks and says, if Apple can do this, why can't you give me that experience? If a hotel can do this, why can't you give me this experience? And so I think the experiences are very transferable.
This cross-pollination of ideas and experiences, right? I think that's the thing I hear the most, is that stepping back and thinking about the customer perspective and understanding that loyalty is very transparent, right? You're going to experience it in a number of different ways in your life. And let's talk a little bit about the format of loyalty. So it used to be kind of, I'm going to say, two broad formats, right? You had a coalition plan, and then you had retailers who would basically start their own. But really, that's more like a spectrum now. So how do you see that spectrum between, what are the advantages? And there's still retailers who want to have their own loyalty program, but can they have their cake and eat it too when they think about loyalty and these programs?
It's funny. There's certainly strong opinions on both sides. There's some retailers who have this view that the currency or the loyalty program needs to be an extension of their brand. And I think that possibility exists no matter what the format, whether it's a proprietary, what we call a proprietary program, or a multi-partner or a coalition program. It should always be an expression of your brand, like how you play in a proprietary multi-partner environment is a decision. It's a brand decision. It's how you want your brand to show up and your experience to show up. So I don't think it's a binary. I should pick door number one or door number two. But I think the fact that those possibilities, you are exactly right. There used to be two models. Now there's so many other models.
Sure.
I think what retailers are coming around to is the realization, though, that the ability to create value for your customers, if you can bring your partners, whether your partners are other retailers or your partners are CPGs, suppliers, vendors, or whether your partners are actually other customers, customer advocates, bringing partners together on a platform allows you to create more value, more relevancy, a richer experience for your customers. And increasingly we're seeing retailers ask for us to help them broker those partnerships.
So I hear a lot of this building of ecosystems, right? The ecosystems can get very complex, but at its ultimate layer, it's still about back to the customer and building that large L or small L loyalty program. And we're seeing loyalty programs, and it's nothing new in terms of I think you mentioned paid loyalty before. I mean, Costco really is one of those paid loyalty programs. We're seeing it.
Amazon Prime is a paid loyalty.
I mean, Amazon Prime,
in some ways, yeah.
In many ways, with some startling statistics around 63% or some crazy number of Americans who are on that program. Loblaws is trying a paid program. Is this just the latest flavor of or is it more innovation on the spectrum? So these paid loyalty programs where they get outsized benefits for investing a bit of money. Do you see a future in this, or do you see this as just something that's going to a reaction in essence to what Amazon and to some degree Costco have done?
Yeah, I mean, you can go all the way back to Chapters. Again, back in the Time Tunnel, which launched one of the first paid programs in the Chapters One Club, and the whole idea they had was to narrow it down to those people who knew that if they paid the money, they bought enough books that they would derive a benefit from it.
The Pareto's Law program, basically.
And so they didn't want the long tail of customer. Today, I think. Back to Caroline's point, it's all on a spectrum. So you could have a free program, you could have a paid enhancement to the program. But when we've gone out and done the research and gone across multiple geographies to thousands of customers, and we said, would you be willing to pay for a program? It's towards the 2/3 rate, if I remember the numbers right, would turn around and say, yeah, you know what, I'd be willing to pay for a program. And so I think there's a growing acceptance to it, but it's not I'm going to pay for anything. It's like I need to find benefits, and you can see the influence when they actually asked them what would you expect for that. Higher earning rates, special benefits and features and free shipping, which where the throw of that comes from.
And it's not like it's even if you think about financial institutions, I mean they've basically had paid loyalty programs. If you think about a premium price on a credit card, right? An annual fee is basically a paid loyalty program, right? You're kind of connected to that card or that FI for a period of time. But I didn't really see it coming in retail that it would be this strong. Maybe it's that Amazon has been able to build such value into it that other retailers kind of looked at it and said, well, we can do that too somehow.
And on the one hand, it's a way to ring fence your customers, because there is a level of commitment. If I paid $100, I need to get value from it.
Well, it's almost satisfaction. I mean, I talk to people who say, I'm going to order from Amazon again because I'm getting so much. I'm going to make them pay. It's
a badge of pride.
It's a badge of pride.
So
I'm getting so much value.
On the one hand, it is a way to ring fence your customers. On the other hand, unless you as a consumer, and you're right, the consumer is hyper aware of the transaction that is about to occur, unless that consumer in their judgment says, I'm going to pay $100 and I'm going to get $150 or $200 worth of value, which ultimately means that, I'm going to go back to segments, there's a segment of your customers who is prepared to pay. But most loyalty operators who are launching these paid programs are not doing it to the exclusion of other benefits for those people who are not prepared to pay. So Loblaw launched a paid program, but they have another set of benefits that is for the broad base. Indigo has a paid program, and they have an unpaid program. And increasingly we're seeing that retailers are using for that segment who is prepared to lean forward. But not everybody's going to sign up.
Interesting. Last questions. When you think about retail today, both of you have been in and around, either worked for retail, has been in the retail, been advised retail for your career. And if I was to give you both an envelope of money, and in that envelope was about $100 million or unlimited amounts of funds, what would, and go start a retail concept. What would that retail concept, what are the building blocks of that retail concept? What would that look like today?
Wow.
Would it be, would there be components of bricks and mortar? Or would it just be pure play? What would that thing look and act like?
Yeah, I can take a run at that. I think where you're going to head to from a best practice standpoint, it's got to be offline and online, offline. I believe that the consumer needs to feel that experience is seamless, that how I interact in either of those environments is the same. So you want to take part of what's happening with the online retailers who are coming offline, the Warby Parkers.
Casper, Airbirds, I mean, almost everyone, right? 80, 85%
they're also
of digital.
selective in terms of where you are. You're going to pick benchmark stores. Restoration Hardware, another good example,
That's an interesting example. I didn't see that one coming either. These massive...
experience. The showroom experience centers.
The one in Yorkville is massive. The one in the meatpacking district in New York, even massiver.
Yeah, and so I think it's about this. The retail really becomes experience, and you come in, you experience the products. There's product experts there who can walk you through and familiarize with you. But the assortment breadth and sort of the entire delivery component is really, you look much more like an online retailer. And I think these kind of hybrid models are where things are going to go. And, depending on the category that you end up in, I think that ultimately, for me, it would be, I would definitely have some form of loyalty or enrollment mechanism, which is about building relationship, building a dialogue, being able to really reflect upon what the information is telling you about where the interest levels are in the customer, and then building a rich content environment, which is, enhancing the physical experience in the communication flow. Okay. So those are the broad tenets. I can't pick a category. You can do whatever, but, I think there's some really smart things that are happening out in retail. Like the Restoration Hardware is a good example. I don't think there's many husbands who want to go shop for towels and whatever else, but if you told me, let's go have a gin and tonic and grab a bite to eat, and it happens to be in the middle of a showroom experience, you're going to have a much greater success of pulling somebody into the experience.
Okay, this is really the last question.
I want to answer that question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think it's a great question.
I'll invest in Caroline's idea. I was not going to throw mine out.
I'd start in a different place, because I totally agree with Brian's comments around retail entertainment. You've got to be in the entertainment business. Full stop. But if I started with a category, I think I would go back to food. I would not be, I think it's a tough time at the moment for specialty retail. Sure. And I would be chasing after share of stomach. There's just so much fragmentation in the way that people consume food, where they consume food. People are picking it up at convenience stores. There's prepared food. There are restaurants, meal kits, delivery. Gas stations have become restaurants. And I would be looking at how do you sort of build a proposition around share of stomach, and start with the customer and then broaden out, as opposed to trying to mesh together, old school formats into a way that's relevant to customers. What would happen if you started with share of stomach and started with customer profile and said, I'm an organic flexitarian, right? Flexitarians is the new term. If I'm an organic flexitarian, what does my meal plan look like, and where am I going to get it and how?
Interesting. Okay. Love that, and it just gives me so much optimism. There's so much innovation happening in the food category. How do you measure all this stuff? So, when I think about, Doug Stevens talks about measuring experiences per square foot. Is it lifetime value? Are we getting back to measuring by lifetime value? Like, how do you, if you set up a retailer, as you both said, experience is important, how do you measure productivity? How do you create these measurements that didn't exist before, or do but aren't quite right? Any ideas about measurement as a new modern retailer?
Well, I'm gonna go back to the same theme, I'd say, which is around. I'd start with the customer, and our conversations with retailers. We're talking about loyalty, but we're always starting with: do you have the belief that customers equal financial performance? If you believe that, then all of the measures that we will take, whether it's more food quality, whether it's embracing sustainability, whether it's a better loyalty program or multiple loyalty programs, whether it's better retail entertainment, whether it's new categories, whether it's pop-up, all of that is ultimately measured by a lift in customer behavior and customer engagement. And I still believe that's the ultimate measure, and there are now some very sophisticated ways. That's sort of part of our Loyalty One's business. Very sophisticated ways to identify customers, assess their potential, and figure out if you're getting your fair share of their total spend in the category. And then there are very effective ways to measure the various mechanics that you use to shape that behavior. And that's not new news. Right. I think the question is, how do you react to those measurements? How do you take action on a very individualized basis? And I think that is the next generation of personalized marketing. Is personalization will not just be about communications or offers. It'll be about price and product assortment and location and category and packaging, and the list goes on.
And all that, the science and the art of retail, right?
Yeah, and I think it's, for me, there's two key measures that I would just add to. I think, I love the original definition we had a long time ago around what really denotes loyalty, right? Because you can talk about emotional loyalty and you can talk about percent spend. And I think it's foundationally, does a consumer continue to shop you in the face of a meaningful competitive alternative? Right, and that ultimately is kind of, we used to measure how many competitive stores is your customer driving by in order to get to the location that you're shopping, and this kind of analysis which gets down to really say what is the gravitational pull that my business has on the consumer and how strong is it. And there are, there's a bunch of metrics you can kind of look at, which I guess be down the engagement trail if you want. So that's one. And then the other one I'd say is just attitudinally. It's the challenge with emotional loyalty, as we discovered when we went and embarked to say, what's the best way to measure it? Because there are existing like net promoter scores and things, but that's different, But if you really get down to measuring the emotion, as many university professors that I consulted on this say, you'll never be able to measure it. And the reason why is emotion in its sense is irrational.
Right.
And how do you measure
subjective versus objective measurement?
How do you measure something that is at its foundation an irrational response? Why would I drive by two competitive stores to get to this? So there are attitudinal measures in there, I think, which are going to say that you're connecting whatever you're offering in a differential way to the consumer, and finding a way to measure and continue to monitor that will really be the key to saying that you're delivering on the value proposition and the promise.
Oh, fantastic. So how do retailers get in touch with you? They've heard you on the podcast. Thank you again for being here. What's the best way to get in touch with both of you?
Well, we're both at Loyalty One, and loyalty.com is. We would actually encourage everyone who's listening to come and visit us at loyalty.com. We've actually just published the 2019 global study in loyalty. It's a great place to start.
Great.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions?
No, it's really simple. I'm B. Pearson at loyalty.com.
C. Papadatos at loyalty.com.
And I'll put both of that in the show notes. So thank you both very much for spending some time with me on The Voice of Retail, and I wish you safe travels in your next port of call.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hi everybody, my name is Layla. What brought me here today is actually a coincidence. One of my mentors actually organized this event. So he introduced this new idea of consumer hackathon, and I thought it would be interesting to learn about what consumers are thinking about today and tomorrow and in the far future, and that's exactly what I learned from this event as well. So I'm very satisfied with the result of this event.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Brooke. What brought me here today is my work has always been focused on the innovation for consumers across a variety of sectors. So I really cared about trying to push organizations to look outside in versus inside out. And logistically, what brought me here is I had a connection with Ted Salter, who's one of the lead partners in retail for EY, and he suggested, based on my interests and my work, that this would be the right kind of connection for me to learn and expand on some of the thinking.
Well, let's talk about this hackathon. When Ted first said we're doing this hackathon, I thought it was coding or something, but it wasn't coding. What was it about? What did you talk about from trying to figure out the consumers?
So the event today was mainly framed around different pillars that EY defined from doing this hackathon event across the world, and all the assumptions that they made about what the future consumers would want, and 150 or 180 values that they defined what we can use to define our future consumers. So the whole event was organized around using the values and see what we think can be relevant for our industry or for our particular companies, and how we can leverage those to our future customers.
So the values isn't segmentation per se, it's something deeper than that, right?
Exactly.
It's changing paradigms. So you're changing paradigms of consumer needs. So as we move into more technology enhanced future, but also as we move into societal changes, so smaller homes, smaller families, greater divides within certain pieces, a more socially engineered world, how does that actually impact, what that means for retail, as well as things like virtual retail, what purpose-led brands really need to be, and a sense of authenticity and truth, and taking convenience as a standard game of play in retail.
What do you think? We talk about values, and that's a big $1 million word, right? Customer values. What do you think? What do you think? And how do you think values are changing over the time? We were just talking off before we started recording about poultry, and that consumers wanted to know more about their poultry, and they wanted to know more about their food in general. What other kind of things that you're seeing in values that are changing amongst consumers?
So you raise a really good point. Traceability and transparency about the products that the customers buy has been significantly more important in the past few years, and also more so in the future as well. So that's something that I think most retailers are trying to catch up to, or set themselves forward to be able to provide a story around every single article that they purchase, no matter it's produce, no matter it's a piece of clothing, just what kind of stories you can build and what kind of branding message that you can embed within the stories that you're sharing with the customers. That's something that is definitely changing, and has a lot of opportunities for us to capture.
I also think younger consumers are actually being very intentional and curating what they buy tells about themselves as well. So as they self-select into retailers or a variety of different goods that stands for who they want to be seen for in the world, you really need as an organization to stand for something so that they can pick you.
It's funny when I listen to this, I reflect on it over the past 10 years. When we thought about e-commerce, we thought a lot of this would go away. Brands would be dead. Brands wouldn't mean anything anymore. It would always just be a search for productivity, the best price, the fastest delivery. But it's not really evolving that way. The values are evolving differently, right? People are looking for more than just being productive and efficient.
Well, efficiency isn't very human. You want convenience, but that's not very human. You don't hang on to that as something that you hold on to. I don't care about nothing. I care about something.
Right. So that's how that's starting to translate more so, because it used to be able to build a brand ladder, right? Your technical benefits, your functional benefits, and then your emotional benefits. But what you're describing is something. How many? 115 or 100 different?
150 values.
150 different values. I mean, how do retailers think about architecting with such complexity?
I think that's $1 million question.
Yeah.
The $1 billion question.
Right. It's go ahead.
And I think it is working through how do you start to segment these values out? How do you actually help people opt into the values that matter to them versus tell them what values matter to them. So I think there's something in this I have personal choice on my values, and so rather than a computer system telling me what those are, how do I select them and therefore select the brands that mean something for me for that.
It's we were again talking to poultry. It's like a chicken and egg. It used to be
it's chicken and eggs.
Chicken and eggs. It was often said, Henry Ford, the old thing. Henry Ford said, listen, if I asked consumers what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. And so the brands need to get out and somehow interpret at a deeper level these values, and then start to interpret those in ways that are unexpected to consumers.
Yeah. So I'll talk about one of my prior roles. I used to work in banking, and so we unearthed that to actually be what does banking truly mean to the people that use banking? Really it's about I trust you to hold my money and not lose it. And so their underlying platform is around trust more than it is about financial services. Financial services is the piece and what they sell on top of that, but really what they can leverage. And then once you get to trust, it actually helps you think about new paradigms around different models around your purpose or underlying need. So you're not only now are we financial services, but how could we actually be the holder of data or the holder of other elements that are actually help you innovate in a different way that isn't such within the box of what exists today.
And I think, Michael, when you mentioned about branding and how whether companies are still trying to set their brands apart from the other competitors, I almost feel like there is going to be a divide between different kind of industries or companies. So for companies who consumers care about what brand message that they send, they will spend more and more money and pay more attention to build that brand. But for companies or for products such as toilet paper or kitchen towels, people don't really care about them. So the branding doesn't really matter in that way.
As well.
Exactly. So there's going to be a divide between a spectrum between how important or how much consumers care about them as a brand and how much they just value that functionality. That will be a decision that some companies need to make.
Yeah, and it's like your luxury items versus your...
Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you think about it, the product managers who imagine being in their chair and they're the toilet paper or paper towel product manager, they're trying to differentiate themselves in these meaningful animated bears or animated characters or whatever. They're still trying to create somehow a connection deeper than just the commodity product, right? That must be an interesting... Do you think that's going to go away, or do you think...
I honestly think it's going to be a hard paradigm, as you get into more voice and convenient shopping and stuff like...
No, thank you.
As you get into this convenience of shop, how do you actually differentiate in those kind of commodity items, especially as you get moved to replenishment models? How do you then get people to buy outside of their model? That is going to be a really big challenge in that business model, and I don't
have any answers here today. Yeah.
I don't have the answer to it, but I do know that you're going to have to do something majorly different to be able to compete within that world in the future, especially as soon as you can press a button as soon as you're...
So if we're sitting here on a sunny day in Vancouver, and let's imagine that we have 3 things to tell retailers around the world that they should do to win, what are the key things that retailers need to know to be successful in what you understood from today and in your experience together? What is it that they need to really focus on? Because they can't focus on everything all at the same time. They can't be everything to everyone. They probably can't out Amazon and the likes of it. You're starting to see this balkanization really of retail, right? You're starting to see.
And I think there'll be a pushback against it as well. So as we move forward, I'm already starting to see it with people I know. Do you really want to buy off Amazon now, or do you actually just want to go down? There's a push against the bulk. It's the same as any of the big retailers prior. Walmart went through it, where Walmart was everyone's convenience place, and then it became uncomfortable to go to Walmart because
it became a bit of a punching bag, really, or the poster child for.
It became the punching bag, and nothing against Walmart, but it became the punching bag for consumers. And I think there's a movement to that, and it's always happened historically, and I don't see it not happening again.
Right. Interesting. So what kind of key things do you think of that make a retailer successful?
So from my experience today with this hackathon event, I think one key thing that makes me really thinking is to offer the frictionless experience for consumption, for buying, or starting from the whole consumer journey.
Yeah.
How we can give them the best experience, even sometimes without them realizing and without them feeling that it's a little bit creepy and not trusting the brand. So how do you balance this brand trust or digital trust in another word and the experience that they can get? That's something that I think retailers need to consider going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, so for me, it was really I already touched on this, purpose-led brands.
Yeah.
Another one is really on how do you create connection and digitization at the same time. Yeah, so convenience through digitization is actually quite easy. It's the connection and the next experience level that is a little bit more challenging. And I think as we move from a world where convenience is standard, what's the next paradigm? And then the fourth major takeaway for me was really around how do we push into new technologies in a way that works. So as we look to augmented reality, virtual shop, I actually don't know if it's virtual shop or if it's something called virtual shop around a virtual collective. I don't know what the answer is, but something around how does this virtual world create more utility than shopping really has in and of itself to have a curated lifestyle.
Yeah. Last couple of questions, and they're a little bit kind of tactical, but I'm kind of interested in your thoughts. So what I find retailers struggle with is they build these digital worlds for their consumers, wonderful apps, lots of connectivity, but when it gets to the store, it still feels like it's 1950. In other words, that connection between the digital and the physical, does that feel like a real focus point for retailers for success? Is somehow connecting those two worlds?
It has to be. I think you see it in other industries, and actually outside of North America more so. You start to see like how are we doing new ways of showcasing product versus actually selling product. How do you actually have more immersive experiences in the store? How do you know who it is so you can create personalized experience through beacon technology? Again, because this is some of the banking innovation work that I used to do in Australasia. So, and then how do you create these like utility cases that support your products around it? So
interesting. Okay, last question. And I get asked this a lot from when I talk to retailers. This is a very pragmatic question. They're trying to drive traffic to their stores and they're looking into the different tactics. I don't know what either of your experience might be. It's a little less strategic, but it kind of is. They're struggling with basic traffic driving tools like flyers and digital flyers and all these different things. That the print flyers are still loved by consumers, at least in Canada, but they're struggling to figure out the next best thing or make them more product. Any experience or any thoughts on that? How to drive, what is it that you can get consumers up and to the stores or to the online store?
I honestly think it's around creating experiences that are based on consumer needs. So in your store, can you create something that leverages off your product but is beyond your product? Because I can just buy it online or I can buy something similar to it on any shop, but like that is what you can't compete with, is what can you add on the focus. And that's what gets me into a store. Is around that value add that the store can offer me.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. And also it takes time because we can't say that all the retailers will switch to be perfect at digital or building their digital world in one day. It just maybe different segments of the industry have different pace at which they will adopt this new technology as well. And to be honest, consumers can only go to so many stores every day and they have to make these decisions constantly. So there are certain industries or certain types of stores that they need to think about really creative and innovative ways to drive them back because maybe they have lost them in the past and maybe they are slowly losing them in the future. How can they drive them back and re-provide or repurpose their brand and reintroduce this value that the brand is sharing with the customers? And that's really important.
Well, I don't think there's ever been a more interesting time to be in the retail space and in the brand space. So thank you both for sharing a few insights here on a sunny day in Vancouver. Thanks for joining us on The Voice of Retail.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Well, that's a wrap on this special Consumer Goods Global Summit edition of The Voice of Retail. Thanks to Kristina, Carol and Brian, and Layla and Brooke for sharing their insights in this episode. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. You can also ask your favorite home devices, Amazon Echo, Google Home, to play the most recent edition. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of ME LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.